Welcome to Abril Bookstore and Roston Art Gallery. We're very happy once again to have with us Vahan Setyan. His first two books were a big hit, starting with the Enigma of the Armenian language, in which he showed how Armenian words have the atomic elements, the numbers in the words. And then his second book, Language as a Fingerprint. This one has been one of our bestsellers, and it's still a bestseller. Perspectives on the Cradle of Civilization and the Armenian language. And it has a lot of information of how ancient we are. And as you all know, Vahan has a huge following, both young and old alike. He presents many new and fascinating aspects about Armenian culture that haven't really been discussed before in many of our books. And his findings through language apply not only for Armenians but to the whole world. And also, as some of you may know, Vahan likes to stir things up and challenge people, sort of like our friend Stepan Partamyan. But he always backs himself up with his wisdom and his research. In general, though, for Armenians especially, he's a source of pride because his books just show how ancient we are and how much of a role we have in the world. So this time, this book is Armenian Origins of Basque, and again, it's garnered lots of interest already. And he shows how these people all the way at the end of the Mediterranean have Armenian origins. But I don't want to talk too much because you're all here to see and hear Vahan. So Vahan, I congratulate you and thanks again.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah. Good evening. This is going to be in English for a few reasons. First of all, there was a request throughout the universities around the United States to have this video taken, for them to present it to their students and also to their staff and faculty, for them to hear what I mean when it comes to saying Armenian Origins of Basque. And I wanted to let you know that, first of all, I really appreciate you coming this way on a Friday night. I know you're all tired, but at the same time, I think that, you know, with the scheduling problems that we had with Arno, I think that having the conversation we're going to have today is going to really affect a lot of people. It's going to make people think. At the same time, I know there's a lot of criticism, which is fine. That's how we learn from one another, which is okay. So, first of all, the question is, you know, why this book? And well, first of all, this is dedicated to Vahan Sarkisian. With a show of hands, who has heard of Vahan Sarkisian, the Basqologist? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so the majority have not. That's the reason number one. Vahan Sarkisian was a prominent Basqologist, linguist, translator. And I'm going to talk about him just a little bit, but unfortunately, I found about him when he passed away, after he passed away, so I really didn't get the chance to meet him in person. But when I heard about him and then I saw some of his videos and his research, I realized that this person has really vanished from the academic scene after he passed away. So I decided to go after his research and the material. So it was very difficult for me to find most of his research. It was all in archives. Even some of my colleagues can't even find the Armenian version of his book. So it's already that's problem number one. We have this enormous person who has done all this research, and he's invisible in the academia. But I'll show you that his research is alive in archives. Many people know him in the academia, especially in Europe. So my attempt was for me to give birth to the guy again, and to make sure that the academic community and the lay people out there know about him. It's very, very important because he was a treasure. He left us too soon. He was very young in 2011. However, he left us with a treasure of information that I think we should revisit, we should ponder upon, and look at his work as a monumental, you might say, work that was given to the people, and he was a very modest man as far as I can tell. One special surprise, today we have their family members here. So we have Ottavik, his daughter, and Sona, widow. And I wanted to give you this book as an appreciation. And Ottavik, I want to thank you for your father, for him to do all this for us. And he has monumental work that he has done. So I want to make sure that everybody knows this is the family who has seen him do all his work. Sleepless nights, you might say. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Vahan.
You're welcome. I'll tell you why it's important for this to be in English, because the Basque want to know themselves where they come from. They don't know. Okay? And they write all their documents in English for other people to come to their rescue. So it's very important for it to be in English. English is heard throughout the world, so it's very important for our information to go out there, because we need critics. We learn from each other, so we need that information to come back. Okay, so Basque Country, as you realize, it's a very small region. They themselves consider themselves to be apart from all the Indo-European or the Europeans themselves. They consider their language to be mysterious and isolate. It's not connected to anything else. And they have kept their language and culture intact, and they work very hard to make sure that their language is sustained. In other words, they have a very close kinship to their own language, the way the Armenians do about theirs. So it's a very interesting aspect that is shared within the two. They think their language is very, very old, and it has the value that they consider to be a golden language, and they consider their language to be a golden language. So keep the word gold in mind as we progress in the conversation here. So this is a close-up to the Basque country, and overall there are about 2.5 million people, and it's divided in different regions. Some are independent, some are not, and the country of Spain and its people are very antagonistic toward the Basque country. They don't want them to be separate. They want to have a close relationship with one another. The Spanish want to consider that area to be Spanish as well. So there's a huge problem already politically. So this is Vahan Sarkisian, and I got the permission from their family to use these photos, so thank you very much. He was an academician, Basqologist, linguist, translator, poet, proficient in more than 5 languages, or was it more? I'm sure it was more.
It was more.
Yeah. Published more than 66 books and articles. Almost all his books were published by the Basque and Spanish governments and institutions. Okay, very important. They published his work. Director of the chair of Romance, Philology at the University of Yerevan. This is just a few of his accomplishments, okay? So we have this guy who has done this monumental work, 66 books and articles, and if you go to the sources, you cannot find them. So this is the problem. When you see silence, or it doesn't exist in the articles, in the scientific articles, especially when the Basque and Spanish governments have published that work for it to be included within their textbooks, then that's problem number 1. You got to go after it to see what the problem is, okay? All right, here's some more of his accomplishments. President of the International Linguistic Academy, member of the International Association of Hispanics, director of the Basque Armenian International Journal Arax, author of Basque Armenian Dictionary, author of a book on grammar of the Basque language, directed a documentary on Basque, and all this information was given by the family, even more so. So, as you can see, he has this enormous impact in the academia, which means that they're currently using his textbooks and his research within the German institutions and elsewhere.
Yes, they provide the internal reconstruction of Basque language, the book that my dad wrote, to the best universities in the world, including Ivy League, and it's going to Japan and Australia. So the best universities in the world, they use that book for their research.
Very good.
Now.
Yeah, so it's going over Japan and elsewhere for it to be used as a textbook. Okay, so that is already an indication that this person needs to be resurrected, his research needs to be found and to be available out there. So this is the book, first time in English, that has gathered all his documents, all his journals into one. So the book is about the references, mostly. It has a lot of references to his research, and then the research after he passed away. So what I did was I took all his research, I found most of them, and most of them were in the Spanish and Basque governmental archives. So if you do a keyword search on his documents on the internet, it's very difficult to find. You really need to know what you're looking at. You need to have certain algorithms and keywords for you to find it. Okay, so it took me about 2-3 years for me to gather all this information and to put something on paper. And unfortunately, I met his daughter, so she helped me a lot. And I'm sure you have seen this book before. That it's the Basque and Armenian dictionary. Okay. Euskal Zandia is an official institution in Basque Country that specifically deals with the promotion and the protection and the scientific approach to the Basque language. In Spain, it's known as La Real Academia de la Lengua Vasca. See, the Basque and Vasca, that shift, we'll talk about that too. So I'll give you a moment for you to read what it says. It was founded in 1919. So this is the primary location where all the archives that pertains to the Basque language are kept. And most of his research can be found there. And we'll have a question and answer session at the end, and then I'll do a conclusion. So you'll have a chance to ask me questions. If I don't have any answers to them, I'll find the answers for you. Okay, the Academy itself has full official recognition in Spain as a Royal Academy and in France as an institution of public interest for the French Republic. And it is supported by the government of Navarre. So try to take notes too, because my approach is for me to write everything down and for you to research on your own. It's a great exercise, I'm telling you. That's the best way you can learn, and it's the best way for you to check to see if that person is saying something correct or incorrect. It's a good exercise. So the government of Navarre has an official archive, and that's their emblem right there, for all the journals that are kept in relation to the Basque language. This is a journal that was published in 2011 from that institution that I told you about. And it talks about not only the people who passed away, but also the works of the honorary members who had work that was done, and it was like a memorial. So what happened was, Javier was a very close colleague of Vahan Sarkisian, and I'm sure the family knows him as well. Again, he was also honorary member of the Academy of Aragones and the Secretary of the Royal Academy of Basque Language. So he knew what Vahan Sarkisian did, and he was very, very supportive of that. So he did a memorial, and within that, he listed all the journal articles, the scientific journal articles that Vahan Sarkisian published. And it starts from one, and then you can realize that he started listing all the work that he has done. The Urartian language, Araratian language, Basque, Spanish, and then the list goes on again. I can guarantee you that most of the people in this room hasn't read one article from there. I can guarantee you that. But now you have a chance, because the book itself tells you where to get them. And he also had a poem in there called Urmia. And what I did was I translated it in English for you, so I'll give you a second for you to read.
Do you want Spanish and
Yeah,
English.
yeah, please.
Urumea. Urmea. Nadie sabe lo que estás haciendo. No one knows what you are doing. A veces bajas en el mar, a veces subes a las montañas. Sometimes low in the sea, sometimes you go up to the mountains. Pero siempre corres, subes y bajas sin cesar. But you always run ups and downs unceasingly. Parece que no eres río, sino una sangre inquieta que circula en las venas del país. It seems that you are not a river, but an uneasy blood which circulates in the veins of the country. Esposo era loco, nadie puede beber un río, tampoco la sangre de un país. Aesop was crazy, no one can drink a river, neither the blood of a country.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it was wonderful. Yes.
Urmia is a river in Basque.
Yes, and in Armenia, in ancient Armenia as well. Yes.
And it's said in Iran.
Yes. Now Iran. Yes. Now Iran. Yes. Yeah, let's Lake Urmia. Okay. In 2012, there was a memorial that Javier had the opportunity to address of all the individuals that passed away a year before. As you can see, Vahan Sarkisian as an honorary member was mentioned, amongst others who passed away that year. And it was given to in front of the Spanish Royal Academy. This is the Spanish Royal Academy. So his research has gone this far. And he was interviewed back in 2007 by Nerea Azurmendi. Diario Vasco is the most popular, I guess, the internet site for the Basque language. And he said that when an Armenian arrives in Basque country, they will speak to him. Here we Armenians feel at home. Now you see why it's vital to resurrect this person and his research for us to re-examine it, for us to read it. It's too big of a treasure for it to be hidden. And I think that if we give ourselves a chance for us to read his material, I think that we'll have a better perspective, a different perspective. You might say, give us another dimension in our view of languages and connect people together. My effort is for me to, as you have seen in my previous books too, my attempt is for me to connect people, not to isolate them. In other words, it's a continuum. It's an evolution of languages and the way it has influenced each other. And I think that we should give credit to those who deserve the credit. At the same time, they should acknowledge what has influenced what. So that we can see this a very good picture of how languages have evolved, how cultures have shared with one another. So he was one of those individuals. After I read his material, I wanted to find an angle for me to take and compare that to what I found on the internet. And the problem is that the internet doesn't really acknowledge his work at all. There are very few articles that you have read which the Spanish government, as well as the Basque, they have just written about him, some of the things that he found parallels with in languages, and that's about it. So can you imagine all that research that I showed you right now? It's not on the internet at all. And it's a suspicious silence, and I think that we should take it very seriously. If it was on the internet, and then they had some kind of a commentary about it, that's different. Some people felt that, for example, we don't like it, or it doesn't make any sense. That's fine, but you don't hear anything about him, nothing at all. So that should be a better reason why we should go after this guy and resurrect whatever he says. So I got a quote from Dr. Peter Bogosian. He's a Portland State University professor of philosophy, and this is one of his quotes. He says, it's not about a conclusion, it's about the way people get there. So let's think that for a moment. When somebody tells us something, what happens is we don't question it. Or let's say if we read something in a book, we just take that person's word for it because we don't have time. We don't just do that. If a scientist says, let's say the moon is 220,000 miles away, okay. We never question it. We should question more when it comes to language and anthropology and ancient history, because that's less of a hard science. It requires all the scientific disciplines together to make it concrete. It's not chemistry. Water is 2 part hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. You can become a chemist yourself and verify it yourself. But as far as with language and ancient history, it does take interpretation. It has a lot of wiggle room for it to have your own perspectives, because nothing is concrete. We need anthropology, we need genetics, archaeogenetics, biology. That's why we have all these disciplines now trying to help the linguists to figure out the origins of language, the Indo-European languages, how they're connected. So we need their help. And fortunately, we have more and more of those people coming forward. So I think that it's a wonderful thing. So I took that, his advice, and I realized that whatever is out there doesn't map onto reality. So it does piss you off. Well, it pissed me off that, Vahan Sarkisian's work is not out there. That's one. And then two, when I compare his work with whatever we find on the internet, another problem. It doesn't make any sense. So I have talked with a lot of linguists out there. I'm an organizational psychologist. So if you tell me I'm a linguist, I don't need to be a linguist for me to figure out things. All you need is common sense, logic, some form of knowledge of languages. If you can read 5 or 10 books on language, you're fine. You don't need to go through all those years. However, if you're passionate about it, go ahead. But there is another approach that you can take, where if you have the right premises as tools, you can find a conclusion your way without even being a linguist or a historian or an anthropologist. So it did piss me off. So what I did was I contacted the government of Basque, and I said, give me something that you show to the visitors to your country. What do you tell them who you are? So this was sent to me, and I don't know if you can read in the back, but I'll read it for you. This is a governmental pamphlet. So let's say if you're a visitor, you go to Basque country, this is what they give you about their people. Okay? So the Basque language is a linguistic and historical enigma. Okay, that's number one. Its roots are unknown because it is not related to any other language spoken today or any time in the past. It's a very strict comment to make when you know better. But no theories have been confirmed which associated with Mediterranean pre-Indo-European languages, the Iberian language, or with languages from Africa or the Caucasus. The first written words with Basque reference were found in Basque Aquitaine and Pyrenean funeral stele, dating from Roman times on the 1st century. So this is what they present, and it's great. I mean, they are very unique. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a video so you can hear the language itself. It's about a few minutes. Okay, this one is a good video. Mystery of the Basques is called. Also listen to what they say.
Herria egina dago, zoritxarrean bizati, baina itxasoak elkartzen gaitu, lehen orain eta beti.
Basque Country is a cultural island. The French in the north, the Spanish in the south, they're Latin. And the Basque, originally, we're not Latin. That makes us different. Nobody is able to tell us, what's going on with our origins. In the Basque Country, there are lots of mountains. The farming has always been very small, and the big richness of the Basque Country has been the ocean, the sea. You see, boat building was the most important activities for Basque for many centuries, and this activity has disappeared. That's why we created Albaola Society. The purpose of this place is to preserve Basque maritime heritage and also to restore and build replicas of historical boats.
Txalupa zahar bat bere zulo eta guzi, ikusi eta badaukagu zer ikasi. Gero aldian ere nahi badugu bizi, zer izan ginen jakin behar da lehenbizi.
We always try to create awareness about our activities, and we said, well, let's get in touch with a bertsolari. It's like improvised poetry.
Kontatzen badakienez nago seguru.
Jo nau beti izan da nahiko txoriburu.
Okay, so they're still trying to figure out who they are. We're not Latin, he says. We don't know who we are. But our language is very special. So remember what he says. We have no connection to anybody else. So there were few DNA studies done recently, and I have that in my book as well. You can read it yourself, that demystifies this enigma and the mystery of Basque. So please pay attention to the words that the scientists use. And it was written on a Word document, so the computer speaks, but you'll have a gist of what they're talking about.
DNA from ancient remains seems to have solved the puzzle of one of Europe's most enigmatic people, the Basques. The distinct language and genetic makeup of the Basque people in northern Spain and southern France has puzzled anthropologists for decades. One theory proposed that they were an unmixed pocket of indigenous hunters. Let's dig further and see what we can find. Relax and enjoy. Now, a study suggests they descend from early farmers who mixed with local hunters before becoming isolated for millennia. The Basques have unique customs and a language, Euskera, that is unrelated to any other spoken in Europe, or indeed the world. Nestled in a mountainous corner of Atlantic Europe, they also show distinct genetic patterns to their neighbors in France and Spain. It seemed logical that they were representatives of an older layer of population settlement, but just how far back their roots went has been a topic of debate. Matthias Jacobsen from Uppsala University in Sweden analyzed the genomes of 8 Stone Age human skeletons from El Portal in Etymological, northern Spain. These individuals lived between 3,500 and 5,500 years ago.
Okay, 3,500 to 5,000 years ago. Keep that in mind.
After the transition to farming in southwest Europe. The results show that these early Iberian farmers are the closest ancestors to present-day Basques. Comparisons with other ancient European farmers show that agriculture was brought to Iberia by the same migrant groups that introduced it to Central and Northern Europe.
Okay, did you pay attention to that one?
These pioneers expanded from a homeland in the Near East.
Where is Near East?
Sweeping across Europe about 7,000 years ago to usher
7,000 years ago, that's where the Neolithic revolution happened in Armenia.
in the period known as the Neolithic. Once the farmers settled down, they mixed with local hunter-gatherers, the descendants of people who lived in Europe during the last ice age. Indeed, the El Portal individuals had more hunter-gatherer ancestry than pioneer farmers from Germany, Hungary and Spain who lived several thousand years earlier. The new study also goes some way to explaining some of the differences between the Basques and their neighbors in France and Spain.
So that was a very important segment of a scientific research that was done. As you can see, that first we started with hearing the Basque language and then went to the DNA and then of course his presentation. If you hear the Basque language, it sounds very, very primitive. It doesn't have the harmony that you would find in Indo-European languages, especially if it's that old. You would consider that to have some kind of a harmonious flow to it compared to other Indo-European languages. It doesn't. It doesn't. And it's going to be key in just a second, but What I did was I took his information, I started going out there to see who else was talking about him. And then there was a linguist and philologist that he was about to retire, so he made a presentation in front of his linguists and anthropological scientists that were part of that discipline, and he wanted to say something about Vahan Sarkisian. So initially he said that, you know, I was just looking at the Basque language in a certain way, then I met Vahan Sarkisian, and then my whole world turned upside down 180 degrees. And I also have that article link here, so you can go and read it yourself. It's in Spanish, so I have to translate it for you. So here's a segment from his speech to his colleagues. Please read it for a second. All right, so we have this person who's a linguist giving a speech to linguists and historians in a large room, and he has this to say. Most of the research in this book are non-Armenians. You know, there's this tendency that, you know, you have to use this non-Armenian reference for it to be legit. No. But, you know, to accommodate the people's needs, I'm going to do it. So we have non-Armenians talking about Vahan Sarkisian, so that should be good enough. And then I went back further, maybe 200 years back. This one about 100 and some. And then René Lafon has this to say about the Basque language. Okay, keep in mind the Neolithic Revolution, keep in mind the Near East, the farmers, agriculturalists, and then just try to tie things together. Sometimes when you have a photo and you're too close to it, you're not going to see it. You're not going to see the entire picture. You know, try to step back and put all those pieces together. Okay, so as we go through the slides, try to piece everything together. Okay. So you've heard of Basque. You know, there are variations. You know, Biscay, Vasconi, Vasconia, Vasco, Gascony, Euskara, Euskaldunak. And of course, they say Euskalheria for their country. You know, it's a morphing of the same thing. But this is the thing: they don't know what that means. Euskara, they don't know what it means. They use it. They call their language that, but they don't know the root etymology of it. They just say it. And if there are any Basqologists here or from Spain, they know the language, I'm telling you, you can ask them, they don't know what it means. The root word, they have no idea, but they know it's theirs. They know that it's a golden language, they need to keep it, but they don't have a root word for it. There were some linguists who said maybe it was Celtic. So they say Celtic etymology is based on bars, which means up. Well, in Armenian, bartzer means up anyway. Again, I'll tell you why Armenian is not in there, but as you can see, if it's Celtic, we can also find Armenian there too. Okay. One of their linguists said, okay, non-Armenian guys, propose that the word escura is a derivative from esan, to say, and kara, way, to do. In Armenian, asel means to say, and ara means to do. However they approach it, we always can find the Armenian derivative, somehow or the other. And that's our point. You really don't need to go around the bush. We'll tell you what the answer is. Just ask the people who know the Armenian language. You can find this in the book on the internet, okay? I'm not inventing this stuff. All right, so what I did was I went further. You know, you see a lot of articles on the internet that talks about these historians said this about the Armenian language and the Basque and so forth. Well, I went to the source, okay? I found the books. This one is from 17th century by Gaspar Escolano. You hear him saying these things about the Armenian. I found the book itself, okay? I'm going to have you read it. And I even translated it for people, and I even highlighted for them so they can see it. So this is a Basque guy talking about their people to the Basque people. He doesn't know that Armenians are going to read it. but he wrote it. Okay, and we have this in original format, so it's available for you guys if you go to the archives. Okay. All right. So here's another book from 1607, 400 years ago. Very interesting, isn't it? Yeah. So in other words, a Basque guy is telling to the Basque people that if you go there and ask these people who they're from, they're gonna say I'm from Armenia. Okay. Here's another one from 1886. If you're not taking notes, the book has all the information for you. So, and I have these pictures in the book as well, so you can find it yourself. And try to protect it too. It might go away one day. The more we reveal this, the more they're going to find a way to destroy this. So try to protect all you can. Try to protect all you can from ancient world. That's what I'm trying to say. Not only Armenian, the Egyptian, the Sumerian, and the Akkadian is very important. Or Turkey is already bombarding the areas where you have ancient civilization. So we're not talking about the Armenian history. We're talking about ancient history that should be preserved for the sake of intellectual honesty, for the sake of shifting the paradigm into what it should be. So in other words, we're turning the clock. We're trying to realign this perspective so that way it will make better sense for the future generations. So I'm sure you also heard of Esteban de Garibay. So he started, examining the rivers and the mountains and the valleys. He decided that, listen, it completely mirrors what he found in Armenia. And I'll show you what he also found and what you can find today. And this is the other thing. You can go yourself, open the map, and find all these rivers and mountains that I'm talking about yourself. You can go to the regions and the valleys and ask them, okay, can I see this map? And they'll show it to you, and you'll see the Armenian names in there, okay? Let's forget about the distance for a second, because there's something called a ship, navigation, okay? All right, we also heard of the Edward Dodson. He's also listed in the articles that you read on the internet, but what I did was I went to the source itself, and I found the guy, his original works, and the study that he did was called Basque Words in Armenian. This is from 1893, published in an official Basque scientific journal. Okay, it's very difficult to look at it because it is a very old PDF file, and it's very hard to read. But if you look at close enough, I have the picture also in there. You can read it better. The conclusion was that he took 50 words. He said that 34 were acceptable and 18 were exclusively Armenian and Basque. In other words, they were the same. Are there any statisticians here? Look at the probability of chance when you have all these words and the majority are the same. And by the way, I went to Arizona State University's statistical and mathematical department. I gave him an assignment. I gave him all the Armenian words, and the Basque guy said, can you find the probability of coincidence? And his work is also here, where he shows me how to find the probability of chance. And he almost fell off the chair because he had no idea that we had so many parallels. He had no answer for it. He said there's going to be a connection. Okay, anyway. So Vahan Sarkisian took that article from 1893 and he did this work on that paper published in 1993 in the Spanish government archive. It's in there. So he talks about what he did and what he found. So he's tried to re-examine that again himself, 100 years later. And these were also found with Vahan Sarkisian help that he has it in Spanish and in Armenian. There are at least 100 here that directly are the same. Not only do they sound the same, they mean the same thing. If it sounds the same, okay. But if it means the same thing, then it's very, very significant, okay? So the semantics and the phonology is the same. Again, you really don't need to be a linguist. Just have that premise by your side as a tool. Okay, here's the toponymic similarities between Armenia and the Basque country. And you can find it on your own as well. There's more. There is also Garun too. And also, please correct me if I have anything wrong, okay? Let me know. Okay, so for us to visualize this, we have to go back maybe a few thousand years and visualize the Armenian highlands at a bigger scale, which covers half of Turkey down to Syria, half of Iran, and to Georgia. Okay, that's how big that thing was. So if we're going to find any of these, for example, Araks, of course, it goes to other people's lands and Shubria and so forth, but at the same time, try to go back thousands of years and remove all those countries that are there right now and look at it from that perspective. That's it. It's very simple. For every class that a linguist take in language, they need to take 5 classes in logic. If they use that, they will be better linguists. Okay. So of course we have araler, aralar, and again, it sounds the same and it's the same thing, a mountain. We're not comparing a mountain to a goat. It's a mountain to a mountain. And then there was another person that told me where, he said aralar is from Haran, which means a valley. Yes, Aran means a valley in Armenian too. So that's where he fails as well. Okay. Of course, we have Araks River and Araks River in Armenia. When I say Armenia, I mean ancient Armenia. Okay. I hope that you're looking at it from the statistical standpoint of probability and chance. And Ashtarak. I've heard that some people say that Ashtarak is Persian according to some of the people that have examined it, but I don't know, it doesn't make any sense to me. Urmia River, Urmia Lake. Okay, to make it simple, I just wrote a few words down, and there's a full list here. Vahan Sarkisian found thousands. He said specifically there are 600. So if you have those 600 words you can take, you can actually have a conversation with a Basque. Okay. And I made sure I spelled it correctly. So if you don't see the J near the water, ur, that's what it is. But it's okay. I'll tell you why. Okay, and also the TX is pronounced as a ch. I mean, we can go down the list, but 8 parallels like this, then we gotta stop for a moment and think. So the question is, not whether it's related, but when did it happen? When? And if we look at their mythology, their language, and the toponymic parallels, and the DNA, it had to be during prehistoric times. It had to be. Okay. So I have this example I usually use. So let's visualize something. Let's say everybody's Armenian here. We decide to go to Africa. Let's go to Polynesia for a second. Okay. We're gonna go to do some mining. So we take the boat or the ship, which we already know how to navigate. We go to Polynesia, and then we stay there for 3 months. We talk with one another, we do barbecue, we tell jokes and stuff like that. So the Aboriginal people hear us. They come to us, we make friends and stuff like that. So they hear our language, a few words they pick up, they learn how to speak. And then 3 months later we go. There is no written text or anything like that, no videos. But they had an experience of 3 months, people they came from abroad. You can imagine that those people are, first of all, they're going to forget who came. There's no written document. But they maintain some words, 1, 2, or 3 Armenian words in their language. But they have no memory of when that happened. 10,000 years later, we go there and we find Armenian words that are being used in them. We ask them, they have no idea. Some people say, Armenia is over there, Polynesia is over here. What are we doing? Why are we comparing it? Even though we find our... so this is a very good example that a memory can fade away, but we can find the language through our language because it is a fingerprint. It's like a DNA. So if we find these words in Basque country, that means that the foundation was Armenian and everything else, all layers were put on top of each other. So now we're going back, we're finding our words, we're telling them that's the case, but they don't remember. Okay, so let's take an example for a second. We have Basque Zati and Armenian Zatel and so forth. So as you can see, Zati, it sounds the same way, it means the same thing. And we have vowel consonant in both cases. So for you to determine the probability, you first of all, you take the Armenian letters. First of all, the Basque don't have their own alphabet. They use the Latin letters, and only 27. So the first Basque document that was written was a poetry I think in 1600, something like that. But anyway, if you're able to determine the probability of chance, all we need to do is first we find how many words we can put together with the letter Z, and then A, and then T, and then Y, and then multiply the probability. For the probability of chance for these words to sound the same and mean the same thing is astronomical. So multiply that and multiply by these words on top of that, because when it comes to probability, you have to multiply. So see how the number is getting smaller and smaller, infinitely smaller, that it is a chance versus a parallel. So that's why we need the statisticians to give us these perspectives. You got to multiply this stuff. Okay, one coincidence, we get it. 2, 3, by 10, 20, 600, we have a problem. We really need to seriously look at the parallels here. And I do have an exercise here in the book, and you can see what I'm talking about. And of course, I have a list of other words that are in there that are parallels. I spoke with some of their universities in Basque Country, and also some people here. They have a Basque studies in Reno, and they have a Basque studies in Boise College, and they want a book for their library. I'm going to send them, and so I'm going to send a video instead of me going there because I'm a little busy. But when they look at the Basque words, they're saying that some words we're not using it anymore, but there is a way they use for it to resurface again as another word. Because even in Armenian, for example, if you go to the dictionary, let's say online, some of the more ancient words will not come up. You just have to go through other dictionaries to get it. It's the same thing with them. So for example, some Armenians have told me, well, I don't know what that word is. Well, you don't know what that word is. It's not in your vocabulary, but we got it. Same thing with me. I was learning throughout the way too. I had no idea some of these words were Armenian. And then I went to a dictionary, I found out for myself. So you can do the same thing. So I urge you to do the same thing, because we enrich our language by going back and learning these things. And then the other problem is this. Just because we're missing a vowel or we're missing a consonant, on top of that, we're using Latin words, Latin letters. That's also another problem. So don't let that confuse you. It's our vehicle. It's our tool for it to use the Latin the letters, but we still need to look at the entire idea, the sound of it, the way what it means. So if hato is heard and then hot is heard, we really don't need to dwell over, oh well, it's a different letter. Well, use your imagination for a second. Use the logic of flow. For example, they will use ipar for north. We say iver for up or further up. We have to use that perspective for us to see these parallels too. Again, look at thousands of years would have changed. Okay. Because as human beings, we don't understand time very well. We're mortal. We only live 70, 75, 80 years, hopefully 100. But when we look at thousands of years, it's very difficult for us to put ourselves in that timeline for us to accept and realize what 1,000 years is. If you go back 500 years and read Old English, you have no idea what it's talking about. So imagine 5,000 years, what will happen to the words. And miraculously, we still have it. So you can imagine how powerful the language was for it to still have some kind of meaning, for us to be able to take that and then realize what it means. Okay? So it was that powerful. Here's some words as well. Well, even Armenian told me, what is this vorm or orm as a wall? They say we use pot. Okay, you use pot, but we also have orm. All right, one thing we also need to realize that we can't isolate Armenian Basque and just talk about Armenian Basque. We have to include Sumerian, Hittite, and all those ancient languages because it is interconnected. And I'm going to give you an example. This is from the bulletin of the Georgia National Academy of Sciences. A lot of people know Gamgrelidze. He worked with Ivanov on the Indo-European. Okay, so this is an actual article too. It's in a book. I didn't invent it. And then we also have a connection of copper and silver and brass in linguistic shift that comes all the way down. That we have Sumerian, let's say Kupabar, all the way down to Basque Coprea, to Armenian Kapar, and Spanish Cupre. So the metal elements are very important because it also connects people together. And the Basque were known of being good metal smelters, and skeletons were found in caves that was very close to the Armenoid race, and it was in blue and greenish color, which was they were exposed to all these metal elements and copper. So the chances are that there was a migration. They went to Armenian highlands all the way there just for metal, to find metals. Yes, sir.
Well, the Celtics aren't indigenous themselves to where they are. They all came from the Near East, so it's possible that they all just migrate together, or like they're Roman.
Or yeah, different migration periods. Yes. So, however we look at this, we go back to Near East metallurgy and so forth, and we already know that the oldest metallurgy was found in ancient Armenia. Agriculture, animal domestication, use of barley, and other things. So the metal smelting is very important. This is the Indo-European tree, and there are different versions of it, and people say that Basque is not an Indo-European language. However, there are scientists, including Gianfranco Forni, who published a book with other of his colleagues, says yes it is. So I got his book and I read it, and he decided to connect it to all these different Indo-European languages within the tree, including the Armenian. He actually had a section on the Armenian too. And if you look at the Armenian languages and compare it to the other languages, you find Armenian words in that section as well. So it's kind of progressing toward all these different languages. And I give an argument why it is hinged on Indo-European. And also there's another perspective too. Let's say it is not Indo-European. Well, maybe it was influenced by Indo-European. And you took some of these words and then maintained the rest. But overall, it has an Armenian influence because the Armenian has had to have been a prehistoric influence versus a contemporary one. They have a street called Armenia, and it actually says, it's the road of our ancestors. There is a folk tale that they have. There was a shepherd that takes the sheep and tries to go toward the river during summertime, and then he realizes that the river is actually very, very high compared to the other summer months. And then all of a sudden he sees that there's this beautiful lady with long hair, brushing her hair with a golden comb. So the lady says that, listen, if you can name the person, the name of a baby I'm going to have, I'll let you go and I'll create a bridge. If not, then I'm going to flood your valley. So the guy thinks, wait a minute, my father said Haitor. And then all of a sudden this bridge came forward and then he passed through. Okay, so they have Haitor. And I give an argument why it does mean Armenian grandchild. And they're actually very proud. If you ask them, they're very proud to have that Haitor last name. If you ask Basque, they'll say it.
Where is Basque last name?
It's not there. This is the Indo-European language tree. I have a lot more slides. So do you have any questions so far? Because I can give you a few more things for you to take away. But let's talk about the word Basque for a second. As you can see, they don't know what it is. So let's find out what it is. Well, if we take their mythology, their perspective on their language, and everything else that we can combine, we can certainly say it's just Voski, Voskial. And I give an argument why it is Voski, because of their metallurgy, connectedness to their metallurgy. We have Voskan, Voskial, Voskehan, and so forth. So, they have a very good connection with metallurgy and gold. So, if you look at all their descriptions of what Basque means and what we can help them with, the Voski word can actually help them out, because it has evolved into different things. I mean, Basque is contemporary, the Latin use, Vasco, Vasconia, Gascony. Gascony is an old region in France. Okay, any questions?
My question is with regards to, we can't go to make these assumptions without linking to the origins of the Armenian language and the possibility that both languages stem from some similar source. The work of, I don't know whether you're familiar with Gabriel Sultanian, 4 or 5 books that he has written about the origins of the Armenian language. And he makes the point that the Armenian language is imported to Urartu by these tribes that came to, which had the Armenian origins, mostly from the West. So the possibility is that the way that language came to Armenia could have also moved to other regions of Europe and the Basque Country.
Okay. All right. So I guess the question is, you're saying that Armenian language came to Armenia and went elsewhere. Now, Armenian language originated in Armenia. It didn't come from elsewhere. Sultanian and others, I get their perspective, and I read it a lot. I mean, if you can read 20, 30, 40 books and scientific journal articles, you can see it. However, at the same time, if you look at the works of Atkinson and Gray back in 2013, through archaeogenetic analysis, they realized that Armenian language is the oldest language that has survived since the last Ice Age, which was originated in Armenia and is very close to Hittite too. So we can say that Armenian came from elsewhere. We have genetic evidence, we have linguistic evidence from all over the place, even Ivanov's work. So you can have your opinion that Armenian language came from elsewhere, but scrutiny doesn't support it at all. The repetition of something that is not true, especially within the academia, I have noticed that there is a lot. They repeat the same thing over and over again for it to sound correct, but if you look at it, it doesn't make any sense. Portasar, a work was done by, I have a name, Kurt Schliemann. Who has heard of Kurt Schliemann, a German linguist? Okay. He examined Portasar. And he didn't know Armenian though. But this is what he found. Actually, this is my upcoming manuscript about that. He found kar to mean stone, nav to mean ship, and ara or ararel to grant. He found these words without even knowing Armenian language. So can you imagine if we help this guy out? Okay, Bortasar is 12,500 years old. Okay, so Armenian didn't come from elsewhere. It originated there because we can find the Armenian language already in Bortasar. What about the cave carvings all over Armenia? Ukhtasar, Jermadzor. Once you keep the Armenians outside of those lands, then they're newcomers too, and then everything else falls into piece.
That's politics.
Politics, yes.
Not science.
That's right. Yes, sir.
Does this substantiate the Armenian hypothesis more so than the Kurgan about the development of Indo-European culture?
Thank you for the question. Does this support the Indo-European homeland as Armenia versus the Kurgan? I have a section on that as well, because I was anticipating that question. Kurgan and Indo-European languages on the Armenian highland hypothesis do not conflict. Kurgan is the second phase. So originally Armenian highlands went to Kurgan, down to Iran. So that's your solution right there, and I'll tell you why. Because first you need to have agricultural origins first before you can have everything else in Kurgan. In Kurgan, it's much more late in investment, basically. So it shows that they went there and took their language and animal domestication, and that's where you have it. In other words, it's the second phase. And I also quote Renfrew as well. There's a lot of work on Renfrew. He says the same thing. Yes, sir?
So I have two questions.
Yeah.
Very specific questions. So do you know how many total words are in the Basque language? Second question is, what was Basque people participation during the Crusader Wars to the Middle East? And did they have any contact with Kilikia culturally or even militarily?
There are a lot of words in Basque that are Latin and Spanish. So when had you heard the video, if you could have noticed that they use a lot of Latin and Spanish words, even though they say they want to keep their language intact, they had no choice because their vocabulary is very small compared to, let's say, to Armenian vocabulary, because Armenian vocabulary is very, very complex, and you can see how versus the Basque. So your question as far as for the Crusades, not many things have been written about the Basque. They started examining themselves in the 16th century. So if they ever did participate in that, we have to go to Roman records, and they're very scarce. So what was the third question? That was the third one.
I mean, did they have any connection with Kilikia culturally?
Well, that really depends. I mean, if you look at the culture right now, contemporarily, it's a little bit different. As much as I can say. Vahan Sarkisian would have answered that much better. But as far as I can see, I mean, we have mythological connections, if we can connect that way. We have Tork Anger, they have Tork, and then...
I'm asking that because some words were very...
ancient, yeah.
Similar sound with Kesap accent.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying fully similar, but there is some similarities with Kesap accent.
Yeah.
So it could be, they could get it or got it during the Crusaders.
Yeah, well, the could be is a very good thing because it gives us a chance for us to examine further. Yeah. Yes.
I have a comment and then two really short questions. I think it's really interesting and ironic that we're living in an era where Armenians are now using Latin letters to communicate in Armenian.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool that we can more easily bridge this with the Basque people. And thank you, this is incredible. My first question is, what is the general consensus of the Basque people when presented with this evidence? And then second question is Basque known to have like gold mines? Are they like, yeah.
Yes, sure. I'll explain, well, first of all, the gold mines, yes. We have found ancient caves with gold mines with Armenoid skeletons in there, yes. And I write that in a book as well. For the consensus, depends who you ask. If you speak with the professors that have known Vahan Sarkisian and they have using the textbooks of his, yes, they agree. Because when you look at the data regarding the Armenian and Basque connections, First of all, they don't say this is the connection and it's wrong. They don't say that. Nobody talks about it. That's the interesting thing. For example, there's a connection they talk about regarding Basque and Georgian, but they say it has been refuted many times. It's anachronistic. They talk about that. And I spoke with an Indo-Europeanist who is actually very well known, and I got her commentary and I put it in a book, and so you can see exactly what she says regarding the connections. But when it comes to Armenian, nobody talks about it. Nobody. So if we can provide this kind of an evidence to the general public, I think there's a very healthy discourse that we can have, which can answer your question. We can do a survey, for example. Here's the information. What do you think? For example, if we were able to show these parallels just to a Basque, they have to wonder, what's going on. There's just too many parallels. Let me answer this. Yes?
Why do you think Vahan Sarkisian's work were hidden?
I don't know why. If we have to talk about the political reasons why, that can be the case. But I'm less of a politician and more of trying to get into what he has written and what can we show to the general academia for them to change their perspectives. Because I looked at it with a very sterilized and very unbiased way. Okay, if somebody gave me all these documents and we had seen all these parallels, would it change my mind? Yes, it would. Actually, it will give me a chance for me to look at this. So if the general academia is silent, then we really need to push this further to see what their feedback is. Because if they come back with a counter-argument, we can take out another journal article and for their counter-argument. Because you have to realize that this person, with his colleagues, not by himself, with his colleagues, he spent decades of work just examining all this. Can you imagine if he had a debate with all the knowledge that he had with all the linguists out there? It would have been a very interesting sight, but that's the thing. We really need to put all the political things on the side and just examine the data and then publish as much as we can. Yes?
You said they have no written language. Mm-hmm. Is there any mythology that's passed on from generation to generation, like Sasuti David and the other stuff?
Well, the DNA study says, few of the DNA studies that was done. The one in the video said that their ancestors were tied to the Near East, ancient Armenia, when it comes to agriculturalists. That was the information that you saw. In 2013, a DNA study was done, and they compared the population of Armenia to the Welsh and the Basque and the Celtics, and around the European area. So they determined that the closest link to the Welsh, to the Celtic, and the British and the Basque were people from Armenia and Karabakh. Yes?
Do they have any mythology?
Mythology, yes. They have Tork. We have, Tork Angyach. And with the same connotation. Of course, we had the Tokharians who had Torku. And then, Sumerian used the word, Tor. Tor means rain in Armenian too. We don't use it. But in Artsakh they use Tor. Yeah. Yes?
Are we talking, you mentioned about approximately this happened in 1,000 years ago, or there is no particular time? And second question, did they have independent Basque? I'm not sure about that. Do you know about that? They have been in an independent country? And also, third question, when Armenians immigrant there as an immigrant, so the Armenian language affected there, what was the original existing language there? Is there any idea about that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, when did it happen? Even Vahan Sarkisian thought that it happened during the Huri-Mitanni times. We had the Armenian kingdom of Mitanni about 3,000–4,000 years ago. He thinks that that's when it happened. That's when the metallurgy boom was at that time, so they had to go at that time and do the migration. The language that they think that is connected to is Aquitanian. It's called Aquitanian, but they think that it branched off to Basque. I want to show you something in Aquitanian. That's what I'm saying. I have a lot of data, and I think that would have answered a lot of the questions if I went through all the slides. You know, they say that it is Aquitanian, but the thing is we find Armenian words in Aquitanian too. So if Aquitanian is the root of the Basque language, then we find Armenian words in that root as well. And always Aquitanian references were found in the 1st century.
And independent?
As far as the country?
Yes.
Well, they have tried to be independent. You know, they had their political parties. By the way, their political party was also called Aralar. Yes, sir.
Has there any research on music, like songs and or dances? If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Hovik, there says you did some similarity comparison to Armenian with the variants.
Yeah.
Are there any research about Armenian to Basque, like music, songs, or dances?
Well, I tried to find that. I couldn't find it myself, especially something that I can show to you as a comparison analysis for that. But as far as these questions go, you know, maybe this can be a follow-up where I can address these questions too. But I did look at that. I was looking mostly at mythology and language. I'm going to look at that part as well. Yes, sir.
Is there any study about the psychological entities as compared or as opposed to the neighboring other populations?
Psychology as far as their mental health or
Their character.
their character?
Yes.
Well,
The Armenian character.
I'll be the first one to do it for you, sir. But from what you read about them and when you hear their perspective about themselves, they don't want to connect themselves to anybody around the area. Even if there is one, they will stay away from it because they think that it's going to tarnish their culture, their language, and their heritage. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Vahan, thank you for your work. By the way, it's fabulous. I've been following it for quite some time. I'm confused. If you can clarify a contradiction in your presentation.
Yeah.
You started from the Neolithic era.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about 7,000 years, and then we see that animal domestication goes further than that by at least 5,000 years.
Yeah.
Also, the agrarian society predates the Neolithic by about 4,000 years.
Yeah.
Why is it that these people are still called hunters-gatherers? If we're talking Neolithic time and 3,000 years difference, then they must have been established society, and the migration purpose cannot be to search hunting grounds.
Right.
Don't you think that during that time, when the agrarian society got established in one place and grew that big, they rather went and migrated to search for new fields, not to hunt or gather, as for to find new planting, grazing lands. I mean, that's a major contradiction in the book.
Sure.
Could you clarify, please?
Yeah, please. Yeah. First of all, the Neolithic revolution varies by thousands of years, so we have a problem of that. Some people say 7,000 years ago, some people say 9,000 years ago. But what we know that the Neolithic revolution happened within the Armenian highlands. This area right here. Actually, it's bigger. Like this. So, first of all, we have to look at migrations not only as a one-step migration, but several migrations too. You can have a group of people to go out there, and then another group of people go after that. Again, look at the thousands of years of difference. We can't just say a year later another group of people went there. You know, we need to give some time and their perspective and their developed aspect as a society for them to go to those regions. If Vahan Sarkisian thinks that an Armenian group went to Basque around the Hurri-Mitanni times, it doesn't mean that there weren't a group before that went else over there as well. And at the same time, we have to look at the agricultural revolution and then compare it to the pastoralism that has transpired after that, because there's always this debate whether the agriculturalism came first or the pastoralists or vice versa. But however we're looking at it, all the arrows point to the Armenian highlands as far as any kind of origins when it comes to animal domestication, farming, and so forth. So if you have all these people who are developed, who are going elsewhere, they're not really, like you said, trying to find grazing grounds. They're taking some of their information to the other side. Most likely it has to be connected with metallurgy, something new, because you can't be confounded. For example, if you're a group of people who are very smart and they can do a lot of things, you don't want to stay in the room. You want to go out there to create things. So that's why I see this as a multiple migration. Of course, Ivanov has this. I want to show you that. I mean, you've seen this various times, and here I have a reference too. So you wouldn't say anything. All right. Well, as you can see that yes, you do have these migrations going on, and of course not only that way, but this way as well. So if, for example, if they had to come this way all the way to at this time, it coincides to all the DNA data that we find. I hope I answered your question.
It's still vague because up to 5,000 years of difference between hunters-gatherers in their hides and in their wildest form. I cannot imagine that 5,000 years after the agrarian society.
Yeah, that's why, as far as for the DNA study goes, they say that the people that went from the Near East to the Basque country were farmers. In other words, they were not hunter and gatherers. They already knew the methods, the systematic methods, so they went there taking their information with them. Yes?
My confusion is the same. It's chronology problem here. If they went there as
hunters.
Not hunters, but agricultural. Then what is it, farmers? What's the connection with metallurgy? Metallurgy and the word Voski. I mean, metallurgy came way after the farming and agriculture. And if people migrated in waves in different times to find either new resources, metals, or hunting and agricultural grounds, why always the destination was the Basque region and no other region on the way from France and Italy all the way to the Basque region? Second question is that the DNA conclusion. I mean, it seems like there is a lot of confusion here. A few years ago, there was a announcement that the DNA concluded the connection with the Celts. If you can explain this, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Well, let me try to explain this in a different way. First of all, it was not only Basque country, but it was Italy, Greece, Spain, everywhere else, including England. So the migration wasn't only one place. We're just talking about the Basque and Armenia right now. Italy, of course, the Etruscans, who were the origins of the Etruscans, they were the Armenians themselves. Robert Ellis wrote about that. And a DNA study was done that, in the southern Italy region, the closest link to DNA are the Armenians themselves. So that solves the Italy problem. At the same time, we are talking about several migrations going on. I mean, if you have the ability to navigate the waters, and so you go toward Europe, you can have another follow-up migration that will happen 1,000 or 2,000 years after that. We're not visualizing this as a one-time event that happened in 50 years. We have to consider more than 12,000 years of history. And at the same time, if you look at the Portasar region, you can really see that those people were not hunter and gatherers that built Portasar. They had to have a civilized society with all the available resources for them to do it. So this is what I mean, Herashjan, that the Neolithic revolution, whatever they say, the time frame doesn't make any sense. It has to be much, much older than that. Because they're restricting it, it's affecting the way we look at the Armenian highlands and what we find in Armenian highlands. It had to have been much, much before that, because if those people were able to construct Portasar, that means that those people were already sophisticated 1,000 years before that, for them to be able to have systematic methods for them to build those things for a particular purpose. You can have people with furs and feathers and leather underwear try to build 40, 50 ton megaliths. It's not going to happen. Yes, sir. You're very modest, sir. Go ahead.
If you can ascertain the origins of the language as the Armenian highland, and you can ascertain that the people were originally from the Armenian highland, shouldn't that be enough to dismantle this Thraco-Phrygian hypothesis that has been going on for decades?
Okay, what is he talking about? Is talking about all the different theories that of the origins of the language and Indo-European language itself. This is the map you're talking about. We have different Indo-Europeanists who talk about all these different origins of the Indo-European language. And we got to separate also between, first of all, it's not Indo-European, it's Aryan. Okay, let's disregard that phrase because it doesn't make any sense. And also it confuses people too. Indo-European, they think they came from India to Europe. But allow me to elaborate on your question because it's very, very important for people. First of all, just because we have competing theories, it doesn't mean that they're all valid. It means that we have a scientific community that is willing to ascertain all of them to find a solution to the origins of the Indo-European language tree. However, what's been happening is that we have a lot of biologists and archaeogenicists coming into the realm to solve this problem. And the more we have those people, the more the arrows go toward the Armenian highlands. Wallace is a biologist. I have his reference as well. He said, listen, we know that Latin is very old, but we got to go back 1,000 years before that. We got to go to the Near East, where the modern Turkey is right now, and look at those regions again. He's a biologist because he's looking at all these documents. He's saying, wait a minute. If you have this region right here that has all the firsts of a systematic society, all the firsts, why are we looking elsewhere? Yes, sir.
This isn't a question, but it's a comment that will help out one of the pictures for the people in the back that were asking. A recent Italian geneticist actually found out through DNA testing the Armenians' closest relatives in Europe are the Romanians, the Greeks, the Italians, the Spanish, and then in the Middle East it's the Lebanese Druze and the Sephardic Jews. So that coincides exactly with the map that you had out of their travel.
This one? This one? Yeah, so, I mean, the DNA studies can be also tricky too. We have issues, but yes, sir.
No, I've got a different topic to discuss. Sometimes in science, we'll find the genetic cause, you look for epigenetics. We're looking at language, which I love, written language. However, is anyone looking at comparisons of intonation as well as nonverbal communication that can at least identify, retain traits, since these two populations, Armenia and the Basque, are quite staunch about not assimilating in the region?
Well, well, first of all, as far as for the grammar, as far as for the verbal and nonverbal cues, that has been examined already, including Vahan Sarkisian too. And that's why he tried to write all those books regarding the innate, the fundamentals of the Basque language. And that's why he was adamant that we need to take the Armenian language seriously to examine the Basque. But at the same time, we also have to consider whether the Basque currently is an Indo-European or non-Indo-European language. And if we have the abundance of an I'm going to call it not Armenian, but let's say Indo-European. If you have that, the question is it immersed after the Indo-Europeans went there and then they inherited themselves, or the Basque language is an Indo-European language, but eventually it did not turn into one because of the influences from around the region. Yes?
I will respectfully counter-argue. In LA, we have Armenians that speak English with an Armenian intonation and cadence. So it shouldn't really matter what the similarity on paper is or on stones, but rather are there innate sort of intrinsic gestures and expression forms that could be video captured rather than photographically captured.
Well, I can look at it from a psychological standpoint too. If you're comparing two languages, for example, there was a question that was addressed that we're using the Latin letters to communicate with one another and so forth. That on a side, we still have fundamental variables that we need to compare with one another. Okay, they sound the same, they mean the same thing, and we have the toponyms, we have everything else, mythology, genetics, however rough that is. If we do that, that takes precedence, should take precedence over, let's say, gestures, because let's say they had a connection with us and then the connection faded away. Well, if there is no continuous effort for that gesture to be continuously perceived, for example, let's say, I mean, if I'm an Armenian and I go to Spain, let's say, and my children grow up, they don't see an Armenian and so forth. If we don't teach each other, we'll never know we're Armenian. We might have DNA, genetic, let's say, that will remind us that you are. But the chances are it's going to fade away. So if I'm not going to see the continuous flow of stimulus of an Armenian behavior, it's very difficult to say that after thousands of years these people have maintained that gesture. Okay, but that's really not the case, because they do not know where they came from, period. They have no written records, no alphabet. And the thing is, we're trying to help them, for them to help us to find this connection. That's why it's very important that we acknowledge the importance of other languages existing for us to find ourselves, really. I do have a purpose why I show you this stuff. If a person is trying to go out there to research, if they find a map like this, they can say, listen, you know, what are you talking about? I found this on the internet, this is where the Armenian highlands are. Why do you keep going that way or this way? They don't have the time or the resources for them to realize that this is the Armenian highlands is much, much bigger. And you need the time for you to research. Otherwise, you can have this battle. And that's why on Facebook, you know, you have a lot of battles going on. Yeah, so you can see it, and it's fine. I love the criticism, but you know, if we are not learning from each other, just criticizing it, that becomes a huge problem. And this is an example. And the other maps that I've shown you, we need to really take a very sober look of what we're looking at, how old the thing is, how far back we should go. And change the way things are represented. I mean, even Anatolia, and what are they talking about? Even the word itself is a problem. So, you know, if you have the continuous bombardment of incomplete and misinformed data that comes to us through the internet, and we're going to have a very difficult problem to overcome. Yes?
I would like to interject with Mahatma Gandhi's words. Your work and our work can be compared with his words. Mahatma Gandhi said once, first they'll fight you, then they will laugh at you, then they will ignore you, then you win. So I hope you win.
Thank you.